Recently, K-pop had made a huge global influence on the worldwide music industry. For example, songs by Blackpink member Rose's APT, Lisa's Rockstar, and Jennie's Mantra had all topped on the international charts. Notably, although they are all K-pop artists, none of their solo tracks contain a single line of Korean. Instead, the entire song is performed fully by English. So this could raise a reasonable question, which is that can the global expansion of K-pop be seen as a new form of cultural imperialism? Good morning, my name is Galila Chain, and here's my presentation on cultural imperialism. First, let's define what is cultural imperialism. According to the Oxford Review, it refers to the dominance of one of the culture over the others, which can lead to the erosion of local language and traditions as the dominant culture be seen as superior. Hollywood would be seen as a classical example of cultural imperialism because it often portrays global histories through Western perspectives, imposing American or European values even when depicting non-Western cultures. Historically, the US has spread its values globally through fashion, film, and tech. The College Board Maori stimulus has expressed the idea that dominant powers often rewrites others' history aligned with present-day values, silencing colonized perspectives, leading to distorted or incomplete understanding of history. Now, with a clear understanding of what cultural imperialism is, we are now in a position that we can critically examine whether K-pop belongs to a form of cultural domination or something else. We can start with an example on the bottom right, which is a chart that I've analyzed 5 recent most popular K-pop girl groups' English lyrics proportion in their new released song. We can see that the least proportion among all those 5 groups is 72.73%. And overall, according to the Cambridge Press University, not only in those 5 groups, but among all K-pop female groups, the overall English percentage is as high as 70.6%. Another example would be those 2 images on the top. It belongs to one of the most famous K-pop idol in the 2010, G-Dragon. He's recently released new song Drama, which also featured with Chinese, Japanese, and mostly English, not a single line of Korean. So this tailored specifically to fans in other regions like China and Japan. And these 2 examples reflects a globalized, adaptive approach rather than one cultural domination, which almost an act of anti-globalization by reshaping Koreans' identity to fit into global spaces, which is showing a form of flexibility. Therefore, it is not a form of cultural imperialism. After K-pop groups like Blackpink broke into the US market, fully Korean language song becomes rare. K-pop are using a more self-effecting strategy to meet Western standards, often at the cost of their own cultural identity. In the College Board Maori stimulus, it said, "In listening to the voices of colonized, rather than the observations or reports of those who were the colonizers, a gap in perception will soon becomes apparent. The narrative of history is often controlled by the colonizers, while the voices of the colonized are usually being marginalized. This emphasized the importance of who shapes the cultural narratives in the system of cultural hegemony. So unlike Hollywood's Western cultural domination that promotes a singular Western aesthetic, K-pop represents a cultural hybridity by blending diverse global influence and fostering a shared cultural transformation." This picture right here is a documentary filmed by a Korean entertainment company called SBS, which is a female K-pop idol being interviewed by SBS. And then she's saying that, "I barely drank water for months during our activities. Eventually, I become so thin that I fainted." So K-pop idols are often treated as commercial product, subject to strict industry regulations such as no dating, no phones, and weekly weight checks. However, these kind of standards are not being expected in the Western pop culture. A paraphrase from the College Board Selena stimulus, mainly expressing the idea that Selena's identity was mediated and commodified, which simplified her cultural significance for broader consumption, which now reflects a similar situation that K-pop is facing right now, where idols' identities are often constrained by the demands of global commercialization. So this form of kind of identical idol production process will erase the complexity and distinctiveness of cultural symbol, and thus cannot be seen as a form of domination. Because cultural imperialism never seeks to gain influence in others by changing itself. We could use Hollywood as an example again. Since the last century, Hollywood has presented the image of blonde, blue-eyed women, which could be a typical example when people talking about ideal female image, and could be immediately referred to in both Hollywood and a broader Western culture. This consistent and successful image building has contributed to Hollywood's cultural hegemony, which is they make their own standards. In contrast, both K-pop male and female idol, they don't have memorable traits or anything that makes you immediately recognize where they're from and what makes them unique. This kind of diversity highlights how K-pop is a fusion of multiple cultures rather than the forces of uniform cultural domination. However, according to an article from Harvard Business School, has suggested that K-pop's commercial influence on Western pop market could be seen as a potential form of cultural imperialism. While K-pop does have a huge power among all the pop markets, this alone does not imply cultural imperialism. Instead, this reflects a process of cultural exchange and mutual influence. We can take fan fiction as an example. Fan fiction is that fans around the world will write short or long stories on their favorite K-pop idols, often in that fan's own language and cultural styles. This could be seen as a prime example of creative reinterpretation or cultural exchange, where K-pop is blended with that fan's local background. These stories will vary greatly depending on fans' cultural styles. So if a K-pop group is extremely popular in one specific region, that K-pop group's music style or that group's concept will shift more to align with that local background. So this is showing how K-pop adapts rather than imposes. So returning to our definition of what is cultural imperialism, it is characterized by one-sided appropriation and control. K-pop, by contrast, is marked by collaboration and a genuine openness to diverse cultural voices. In conclusion, K-pop serve as a prime example of cultural hybridity instead of a traditional cultural imperialism. While its commercial success is definitely undeniable, it operates through erosion instead of erasure or conquest. Thank you. That's it for my presentation.
Right, no applause, or one applause. Okay, two questions for you. First up, how valid and reliable were the sources that you used, and then how do you know they were?
So I definitely know my sources are very reliable because, first of all, for all of the definitions, like the definition of cultural imperialism, is all from either from scholarly reviewed journal like the Harvard Press, the Cambridge University Press, and secondly, for all of the data I've analyzed is directly from the YouTube music video of that group. So it's definitely like the first-hand source. It's not data analyzed by someone else.
All right, what advice would you have for other people that consider this as a topic to research in the future?
So I would say K-pop is a really diverse topic. So I would suggest if they're researching a similar topic, they would specify their research scope to, I would say, 2 to 3 K-pop groups, because K-pop is such a diverse thing. If you're focusing all of the things in K-pop, then it's maybe too broad to talk about. So I would just say narrow down your research K-pop groups. That would be really helpful.